Silver investors. Imagine waking up one morning and realizing the entire Western banking system has been valuing its balance sheet using metal it does not legally own and cannot touch. That is not a conspiracy theory. That is the way COMEX counts eligible silver. And the bill for that fraud is now tied to a hard floor in Shanghai and an 11-day deadline on the COMEX calendar. I'm OG John AG, and in this video, we're going to walk through the Shanghai ransom, how China's $86.91 floor traps Western banks, why COMEX is mathematically short tens of millions of ounces going into March delivery, how a real physical squeeze just took down a major dealer hub in Shenzhen, and what all of this means for anyone still trusting paper to stand between them and a silver shortage. Segment 1. The two kinds of silver COMEX doesn't want you to distinguish. Let's start with the core accounting trick. Inside the COMEX system, there are two categories of silver. Registered, metal with a warrant, explicitly available for delivery against futures. Eligible, metal sitting in COMEX-approved vaults that meets purity specs, but is owned by private parties using the vault as storage. FX data and COMEX reports show total silver in COMEX vaults, about 381 million ounces as of mid-February. This is the number you see flashed on financial TV to make you feel safe. Break it down. Registered, only about 98 million ounces, the metal that can actually be used to settle delivery. Eligible, about 283 million ounces, private property, off limits unless the owner chooses to sell. So when the media says COMEX has 400 million ounces of silver, no shortage, what they're really doing is adding up your property and calling it their cushion. It's like a landlord telling the bank, I have $10 million of assets in my building, while pointing at desks and computers owned by tenants. If he tries to sell that tenant property to pay his own debt, he goes to prison. Eligible silver is the tenant's furniture. Registered silver is the landlord's inventory for sale. For delivery, only registered counts. And that pool has quietly sunk under 100 million ounces for the first time in years. Segment 2, the math. 5.1 leverage between paper claims and real metal. Now let's put some numbers on the leverage. Across silver futures on COMEX, the total paper claims outstanding add up to roughly 500 million ounces worth of contracts when you include near-month and out-month positions. Against that, we just said registered inventory, the real deliverable metal, is 98 million ounces, projected towards 70-80 million if the current drain continues into the March delivery window. That's a leverage ratio of about 5:1. 5 ounces promised for every 1 ounce actually sitting in the available-to-deliver bucket. Zoom in on March. Trajectory of open interest suggests around 120-130 million ounces of March contracts could still be held into first notice day on February 27th by longs intending to stand for delivery, against projected 70-80 million ounces of registered inventory at that time. That's a 40-60 million ounce shortfall baked into the structure before a single bar moves. This isn't market sentiment, it's simple subtraction, claims metal, by tens of millions of ounces. The entire system only works if the majority of longs sell or roll, and almost nobody insists on actually taking 5,000-ounce bars out of the building. The banks are running a fractional reserve silver system and praying the crowd never asks for its money back at the same time. Segment 3. The drain. 12 million out in a month, 8 million in a day. Now look at the direction of travel. COMEX reports show early January registered silver, about 110 million ounces. A few days before February 12th, down to 101 million. As of February 12th, 98 million. That's a 12 million ounce drop in just over a month, and the pace is accelerating. On February 11th alone, roughly 3 million ounces moved from registered to eligible. Another 4.7 million ounces left the eligible category entirely, withdrawn from COMEX vaults. That's nearly 8 million ounces of metal changing status, or leaving in a single day. Think about the dynamic. Registered is shrinking. Eligible owners are pulling metal out or refusing to convert to registered. Meanwhile, delivery appetite is rising, not falling. This is what a death spiral looks like for shorts. Less inventory, more claims, rising risk. And as risk rises, smart money pulls even more metal out, which increases risk again. At the current drain, we're plausibly walking into March with registered silver in the 70-80 million range. Potential March delivery demand of 120-130 million ounces if industrials and sovereigns stand. That's not a theory. That's a calendar plus a tape measure. Segment 4. Force majeure fantasy. Why will just cash settle is a myth. Whenever this structural shortfall comes up, somebody says they'll just declare force majeure and settle in cash. Time to kill that myth. Force majeure clauses are therefore vaults destroyed by a hurricane, sudden export bans from governments, war physically interrupting logistics. In other words, events that make performance impossible, not merely unprofitable. What is not force majeure? We sold 5 ounces of paper for every 1 ounce we had, and now we don't want to pay up. That is not an act of God. That is an act of greed. If a bank shows up in court and says, "Your Honor, we need relief because we sold 500 paper ounces for every physical ounce, and now longs want delivery," the judge says, "then go into the market and buy the missing metal at whatever price is required to meet your obligation." That's called covering your short. If the cover price is $150 after you sold at $76, that's your problem. Contract law doesn't give you a get-out-of-jail card because your leverage blew up. Force majeure doesn't save you from a bad bet. So the banks are cornered between delivering the metal or going insolvent, trying to source it. If enough longs stand and eligible owners refuse to donate their property to bail the system out. Segment 5, Shanghai's 86.91 floor, the ransom price of real silver. While New York counts metal it can't touch, Shanghai quietly set the real price of silver before going dark for the Lunar New Year. Right before the holiday, the Shanghai market closed with silver at $86.91 per ounce. At the same time, COMEX spot was around $76.71, a $10.20 gap. That gap is not noise. It's not just Asia paying a bit more. It represents the premium Chinese industrial buyers are willing to pay for guaranteed near-term delivery. The difference between a paper promise and metal you can actually put into a factory and turn into product. For a solar manufacturer in Shenzhen needing 1 million ounces this quarter, the choice is buy COMEX futures at 76 and hope the system honors delivery, or pay $86.91 in Shanghai and know the metal shows up this week. Any serious operator pays the higher price. Product shutdowns cost more than a $10 premium. That's why $86.91 is not just a quote, it's a functional floor, the price of certainty in the world's biggest manufacturing base. Segment 6. Why the Shanghai floor is an unbreakable trap for Western banks. Here's where it gets lethal for COMEX shorts. Shanghai is closed for the Lunar New Year. That $86.91 closing price is frozen until they reopen. During the holiday, Western banks can try to smash COMEX lower, dump paper, paint the tape at 70, 65, or even 60 if liquidity is thin enough. But the moment Shanghai reopens, every industrial buyer and trader in China is looking at COMEX 60, Shanghai last at $86.91, a $26 gap. If metal were freely mobile and inventories flush, arbitrage would be instant. Buy cheap in New York, sell dear in Shanghai, pocket the spread until prices converge. But metal is not freely mobile. COMEX registered is thin. Chinese export controls now restrict silver leaving the country. Vaults on both sides are being drawn down, so the arbitrage can't be closed by shipping large volumes. It has to be closed by repricing. That means COMEX will be dragged up toward Shanghai, not the other way around. You can push paper down in a holiday vacuum. You cannot keep it down once the largest industrial buyer in the world comes back and starts hoovering up every ounce they can see below their functional floor. The 86.91 level is like a magnet. The lower Western banks push during the blackout, the more violent the snapback when China comes back online. Segment 7, Shenzhen's collapse. When paper promises meet empty vaults. If you think this is all abstract, look at what just happened in Shenzhen, the heart of China's jewelry and bullion trade. In the Shuibei district, where roughly 70% of China's gold and silver trade flows, a major platform called Jewel Rui was selling prefixed pricing contracts, 10% deposit now, metal later at a locked-in price. In other words, a retail version of a futures contract. Paper promises backed by the assumption that metal will be available and cheap enough when delivery time comes. Then the volatility hit. Silver ripped from the 70s to around 120, then crashed back down. The leverage blew up. The firm could not source enough metal at the promised prices. Customers showed up asking for their bars. The vault was effectively empty. Result, police raids, executives arrested, the government banning prefix pricing and leverage in that market, forcing a return to cash and carry only. Pay full price. Take metal now. That is the same basic model COMEX runs, highly leveraged paper against assumed future availability. But in Shenzhen, the scheme already hit a wall. The difference is, China just forced its retail market to admit reality. New York and London are still pretending the same structure is fine at a much larger scale. Shubei's collapse is the canary in the coal mine. When you promise more metal than you can source, volatility doesn't just hurt charts. It wipes out platforms, triggers arrests, and shuts down whole districts. Segment 8, February 27th. When COMEX's prefixed promises face their Shuibei moment. Now bring it back to February 27th, 2026. First notice day for the March silver contract. By that date, any long still holding March has to choose sell and take cash or hold and demand delivery of 5,000 ounces per contract. In normal times, around 99% of longs close or roll, only a tiny fraction stand for delivery. The banks depend on that. They assume futures are a speculation tool, not a metal withdrawal mechanism. But this time, the composition is different. Open interest is elevated. A larger share of longs appear to be industrial users, sovereign and institutional accumulators, importers who actually need metal, not just price exposure. These players are not interested in rolling a casino chip. They want bars. Run the math again. Registered inventory by then. Likely 70, 80 million ounces. March open interest that may stand 120, 130 million ounces. Shortfall, 40, 60 million ounces, before you even talk about May, July, and further out contracts. If enough longs stand and enough eligible owners refuse to convert and sell, COMEX hits a point of mathematical insolvency on delivery obligations. That's not a slow grind. That's a binary moment. Either metal shows up or rules and trust break. Segment 9, checkmate scenario. When China controls both claims and vaults, the nightmare configuration for Western banks is this. The same deep pocket players both hold a chunk of the long futures and own a big slice of the eligible silver sitting in vaults. If that's the case, they can simply say, we're standing for delivery on our longs and we're not converting our eligible into registered to bail you out. Now the shorts are cornered. They cannot seize eligible metal without committing outright theft and detonating the entire custodial industry. They cannot invoke force majeure for their own over-leverage. They must buy metal in the open market at any price or default. In that scenario, price doesn't grind from 76 to 80. It gaps from 70-something to triple digits in a desperate scramble for whatever ounces are still actually for sale. We've already seen a dress rehearsal for this dynamic. The January blow-off and crash where silver spiked and then collapsed, but COMEX's registered metal kept draining anyway. The Shuibei collapse, where a smaller, local version of the same paper-backed by future metal model hit the wall. February 27th is COMEX's turn to find out how far that model can be stretched. Segment 10, geopolitical fuse, Strait of Hormuz, and the dollar's real backing. As if the vault math wasn't enough, there's a second fuse running alongside it, geopolitics. The video you referenced ties in the Strait of Hormuz, a 21-mile-wide choke point through which roughly 30% of the world's seaborne oil flows. Tensions between the U.S. and Iran are elevated, naval assets are deployed, drone harassment and threats of closing the strait are on the table. Why does this matter for silver? Because what backs the dollar in practice is not gold, it's U.S. military power, control over sea lanes and the global energy system. If that perception cracks, if a carrier group is damaged or the strait is effectively closed, then the implicit guarantee behind the dollar gets questioned. Capital rushes out of dollar-denominated claims and into hard assets with no counterparty risk, gold and silver. Combine that with COMEX running a 5.1 fractional reserve on silver. Shanghai already setting a higher functional floor at 86.91. Inventory is draining. A military shock doesn't just push price up. It forces the re-rating of metals right when the paper system is least able to honor large delivery demands. One fuse is vault inventory, the other is military credibility. They're burning at the same time. Segment 11, how to think and position in the next 11 days. If you're listening to all this and thinking trading opportunity, you're missing the point. This is wealth preservation territory, not 5-minute scalps. Key principles for the next 11 days and beyond. Physical over synthetic ETFs and pooled products often have cash settlement language. In a delivery failure, you risk getting a fiat check at the old price while physical trade's much higher. Prefer allocated and segregated storage metal titled in your name, not in a shared pool. Jurisdictions and custodians with clean legal structures and audits. Understand that a price smash before Feb 27 is a feature, not a bug. Thin holiday trading before Shanghai reopens is the last window to shake out weak hands. If price drops but registered inventory also drops, that's not bearish. That's metal leaving while the sale sign is up. Size with the endgame in mind. If you believe silver can eventually print 3-digit prices once paper breaks, then the difference between 70 and 80 is noise. Position sizes should matter to your net worth, but not to your sleep. Expect volatility, refuse to be harvested by it. Whipsaws are part of the script when systems break. Tight stops in this environment are a donation to the very players trying to reset the board before delivery. The core decision isn't, will silver be up or down next week? It's, do I want to own metal before this fractional reserve model of COMEX silver gets stress tested or after? You've been watching John AG here, and I'm OG John AG. If this helped you see how Shanghai's 86.91 close, COMEX's 5.1 leverage, the Shuibei collapse, and the February 27 deadline all tie into one story, the end of pretending eligible equals available. Hit like so this doesn't get buried, smash subscribe with all notifications on, and drop a comment. Paper promises or physical power? Tell me which side you're on before that delivery clock hits 0, because on this channel we don't just watch the quotes, we watch who still has metal when the quotes stop mattering.